November 26th, 2010. Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about sex. Sex is enjoyable. Sex is important. So why are there so many women who are not enjoying a satisfying sex life? I think this is something that goes across all age groups, but a 2007 study called The Correlates of Sexual Functioning with Midlife Women showed that only about half of us are enjoying satisfying sex. So what does this mean? This means that possibly half of us in this room are not enjoying satisfying sex. I think we've all experienced the roller coaster ride that our sex lives can be. We have hormonal issues, physical issues, emotional issues. We are complex creatures. I've experienced some of these hurdles myself, and I've reached out to speak to some other women to figure out what issues they were having and what they've done to overcome them. The reasons for sexual dissatisfaction are vast. But let's take this opportunity to examine some of the things that we might have control over that we're doing in our lives that are putting hurdles in the way of our sexual satisfaction. Nurturing our personal relationships and nurturing our relationships with ourselves are both really important things that we need to do for our sexual satisfaction. If we're failing to nurture these relationships, we are probably neglecting our sex lives. I would like to discuss with you some things we can do and convince you to address some choices that we can make to have a more satisfying sex life. To address the choices, first let's talk about some things we can do in our personal lives to make our to enhance our sex with our partners. What makes sex work is often the relationship between the partners and the effort that they put into the relationships. This statement is a conclusion from a 2006 article in the Journal of Sex, titled The Ebb and Flow of Marital Lust. Now this seems to make sense, and it also seems to be a given, but what does it mean? What it means is that we need to communicate with our partners and prioritize our time together, because that all has effects on our lust levels. The ability that we have to communicate our needs is key. Communication on all issues, including sex, is a necessary tool in finding sexual satisfaction. One of these things that we really need to learn to do is self-disclose. Our ability to self-disclose and communicate our needs is a really important tool to strengthen our intimacy levels with our partners. Perhaps finding the courage to find this kind of sexual aggressiveness is a struggle for some women. A 2002 study published in the Perspectives of Sexual and Reproductive Health showed that many women are perceive themselves as unable to communicate their needs and perceive themselves as not having any control over their own sexual behavior. All women need to find the voice to communicate their needs, to be able to communicate what they like, what they don't like. One lady I spoke to expressed her need to articulate and communicating being very important. She mentioned that her needs have changed over time. So what she said was maybe 10 years ago, her needs were different than what they are today. For her, remembering to experiment with different things to find what's right for our sex lives today, and realizing that maybe what worked isn't going to work anymore, and we need to find what works for today and tomorrow and the next day. Women certainly need to overcome some of the gender stigmas involved in sexual communication with our partners. A simple but important example of this is lubricant use. there's this myth that women lubricate naturally, and this isn't the case. In fact, the 2009 Indiana University study showed that using lubricants with sexual intercourse actually heightened the ratings of sexual satisfaction. So we really need to learn how to communicate these needs and ask for these tools because they're available to us. We must also find time in our lives for sex. Sexual frequency and sexual satisfaction go hand in hand. Some research shows that to increase the frequency of sex actually increases sexual satisfaction. This suggests that if we make time for sex, satisfaction will follow. A November 2008 study in Feminism and Psychology, titled "What Makes Women Desire," makes a point to acknowledge that we don't always feel desire. Women actually need sexual cues and sexual stimuli. So perhaps the best way to increase our libido is to have sex, even if we're not necessarily feeling the urge. Sometimes simply having sex will make us desire sex more. Now that we understand the importance of prioritizing communication and sexual intimacy with our partners, we must also remember how important it is to love ourselves. It is unlikely that we can experience a positive overall sexual experience or fulfilling sexual experiences if we're not prioritizing ourselves in the choices that we make. If we're experiencing a negative mood or anxiety, it's very unlikely that we are engaging in sexual activity. In the mood for love or vice versa, which is a 2007 study in the Archives of Sexual Behavior, explains that stress and anxiety have been shown to impact the women's rate of orgasm. The same study shows that sexual activity has a positive impact on overall mood, and it lowers your anxiety levels. Stress may be a which came first, the chicken or the egg factor when it comes to sex. Perhaps what's causing us stress is that we're not having enough sex. We need to reevaluate our stress and anxiety coping skills because it does affect our sexual being. We can learn mindfulness techniques to reduce our stress. They might be meditation or yoga or breathing exercises. Bringing stress coping skills into practice will actually improve our sexuality and our overall health. One of the stressors that women may experience is poor body image. How we perceive our bodies and our body esteem may very well hinder our sexual response. Weight concerns and how sexually attractive we feel have a correlation with sexual desire.